Okay, so the fulling is very similar to fulling everywhere else on the body. You're typically lifting up with your fingers, pressing down with the heel of your hands so that you can lift the tissue, press it against itself or the bone, and then peel it away. And like fulling everywhere in the body, you can basically change the direction of your hand or the tool you're using so that you can grab the tissue effectively depending on the size of your hand and the size of your client. Sometimes you might want to have both hands together. Sometimes you might want to use your forearms or elbows to achieve the same technique. And in almost all cases, you want to be lighter on the medial side than the lateral side. Sometimes people can be quite tender on the medial side. And you typically can use quite a bit of pressure on the lateral side. I will often find it easier to stand on the opposite side of the table to work the lateral side well. What you don't want to do is have too intense of an angle on your wrists. Especially if you have weak wrists, that's a vulnerable position for them. So a couple Swedish strokes, I end up in that position, but you don't want to do too much of your work tilted way back. So you might be on a better angle to actually face the work like this, so your wrist angle isn't so intense with a lot of pressure, or standing across the table. And sometimes you can achieve the same kind of technique if you get down low, and you can cause the same kind of lifting with your elbow. And you can also take the tissue down and out. I can support with my other hand so I don't slide. And there's some jumpy muscles in there, so I want to be careful that I don't jump off of them. So I'm going to carve them and pull them off. It's basically using a bigger tool for the same effect. If you ever feel like your tool is not strong enough, like your fingers or your hand, to effectively work through the layers of petrissage, try something like your fist or your elbow so that you can actually work through the layers. Because there were some very tight muscles here that I feel like to actually effectively scoop out, I needed to actually get a little bit more a little bit stronger with. And now they're getting nice and squishy, and now I can start to isolate which bands are still tight. I feel like I have to whisper with him snoring. And then you can reassess as you go. People on this side might see that this is incredibly squishy and soft now. And it was very, very solid before. So what's very beautiful when you soften it to that degree is now you can isolate, okay, look at all these nice big squishy spots. Now I can feel what's left. So as I go in there, you see that little jump? There we have a very nice tight spot left, and we know that the area is warmed up well enough. So if I crisscross it like this and it's jumping this way, it's a tendon, or excuse me, a muscle about this wide. So I want to get down to a 7, face in the right direction, patiently wait while it melts. Now that I've warmed up the area, so I'm going to get down to a 7, which since he's asleep, I have to assess just through the feeling of the tissue. And now my facing the direction of the fibers is very subtle. And I wait. Now I could use a bigger tool if I had to, like my elbow. But the tissue's warmed up really nicely and it's melting. As the tissue melts, there's going to be certain spots that you kind of have to slow down on. I am not using a lot of pressure. The petrissage work that I was doing was actually much more physical than this, but because there's such a big release in the tissue, I'm feeling waves of heat rush through my body. And I'm actually sitting here much more passively than when I was doing all that physical petrissage work, but there's big releases happening. This right now is going right down to his bone, and it's melting really quickly now. And then I want to flush out and reassess, use some effleurage, use some petrissage. And almost always what you're going to find is that the area right under your fingers where your stroke traveled is going to be soft enough, but that in the neighborhood there might be some residual spots. So right here is fantastically soft, and right next to it there's another tight spot. I'm going to show you one more. If you needed more support, you could totally support your hands against each other, or if you felt like you needed more strength, you could totally use a forearm or an elbow. And you could totally support it with your other hand if you felt like you needed more support to sense what you were doing and or to not slide off the tissue. The most important thing here is to get to a 7 without trying to travel, and then wait as you're facing the right direction. Back off. Don't try to do anything, and then it will melt. Many therapists feel waves of heat in their body when the releases happen. Or you'll just feel the tissue get soft and squishy, or you might sweat. I don't know how to explain why you feel so hot when there are releases.
It's like you felt like it's such bad for you.
Yeah, I use very intense deodorant, and I always change brands. Because if you keep changing brands, you can kind of fool your body.
I can't use the clinical strength,
But I've tried the natural stuff, and as a massage therapist, you can't.
I'm trying it too.
I use olive oil.
Well,
Yeah, it's because I'm Italian, though. If I was Spanish, I'd use lime.
I don't know. Spanish uses olive oil too. I know this is going to turn into cooking. Alright, so then you flush and you reassess. So right there, right down to the bone, soft as can be. Beautiful, soft. And then there's little areas that you basically, if you took the time, you'd carve out. So if he was, let's say, focusing on some knee or leg issues or postural issues with his leg, we could take the time to carve out all these little spots. But I just wanted to show you that sequence a couple times so that you know how and where to integrate it. You flush with your petrissage and effleurage. You make it feel nice again. You reassess, and you talk to the stuff that's tight. You don't have to make too much nice when they're asleep, but if he was awake, being at a 7 and doing intense releases sometimes can feel like good pain or edgy or intense work, and so sometimes you need to focus more on the soothing it out aspect. When they're asleep, you can focus more on the flushing aspect. And rocking is always lovely, integrates the whole leg. And now it's talking to his whole body by rocking.